Today we're going to look at section 8.6 where we are going to compare the different functions that we have been learning about. So let's take a look down here. So far we've studied linear functions, exponential functions, and quadratic functions. And we can use these functions to model data. So let's just do a quick review. Remember, linear function, the general form of the equation that we typically use is y equals mx plus b. Remember, that's slope-intercept form. There are other forms for linear functions, but this is the main form that we use to see if a function can be linear. If we're looking at the graph, we know that a linear function is going to be a line. Then we can talk about exponential functions. Our exponential functions have the form y equals a times b to the power of x. So remember when x is in the exponent, that's an exponential function. And the graph of our exponential function is this curve that looks like a hockey stick. Our last function is the quadratic functions, and our general form here is in standard form, y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. Again, there are other forms of quadratic functions, but this is the form we're going to use to see if it is quadratic or not. And the key thing with quadratic functions is that it has x squared. When we have an x squared in the function, that makes it quadratic. Remember, the graph of a quadratic function is a U-shaped graph, which is called a parabola. So let's take a look at example 1. So it says we're going to plot the points and then tell whether the points appear to represent linear, exponential, or a quadratic function. And let's look at A. So we have these points here for part A. They plotted these points, and we can clearly see that these points are forming a U-shaped graph or a parabola. So because they're forming the parabola, it's a quadratic function. Part B, we have these points here. They plotted the points on the coordinate plane, and these points look like they are forming a line. So when the graph forms a line, that would be a linear function. Part C, let's look at these points here. They plotted them on this graph here, and they're forming this curve, this hockey-shaped curve here. So when it's forming a curve like this, that's an exponential function.